Second Kings tonight. There's Bibles on the table. If we need more, there's some over there behind the desserts as well. So, but we're going to start in chapter 19. So Second Kings 19. And this will be our final night dealing with all the kings in 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles. So we talked about, Second Chronicles 2nd Kings 19 is where we're going to be.
What was that?
2nd Kings 19. Yeah. So we're dealing with Hezekiah. We have been for a couple of weeks, and so we're trying to see what goes on. And you know, it's appropriate because we had the shooting on Monday. By the way, and I've told almost everybody here this, I was about a mile from the school when it happened. I was on Hillsborough Road going to Bobby Johnson's surgery on Monday, and I had to pull over because 42 police cars went by me. I counted them as they went by, and then 10 fire trucks, and then 5 of the large ambulances went by, and I knew it had been a terrorist attack or something at that point, you know, with that many cars responding, or a school shooting. And so we try to, you know, understand why this kind of thing happens. There's going to be people on TV that say, you know, this was Satan that did this. They're going to say this is because of this is because of this. And there'll be some people who attribute it to God. And those are the people that we're kind of, this lesson is going against, is trying to understand how do you know when God is acting and not. And that's where we are at this point. We're going to be in 19:1. And it says, when King Hezekiah heard this, he tore his robes, his clothes, and put on sackcloth and went into the temple of the Lord. He sent Eliakim, the palace. Oh, actually, hang on a second. I got to back up a little bit. I'm sorry. I messed up. Look at 18. Let's go to 18. That's where we need to start. I apologize to you. Beginning 18:1. I was a chapter off. In the 3rd year of Hoshea, son of Elah, king of Israel, Hezekiah, son of Ahaz, king of Judah, began to reign. He was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 29 years. Now, Jill and I have been married 29 years, and that's a mighty long time, and I'm here to tell you. 30 years this July, Jill and I will be married, and but that's a long time for somebody to be king. It says his mother's name was Abijah, daughter of Zechariah. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, just as his father David had done. He removed the high places and all this stuff, right? I mean, he did a great thing. If we go down just a little bit, we're going to pick up in verse 9, and it says, in King Hezekiah's 4th year, which was the 7th year of Hoshea, son of Elah, king of Israel, Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, marched against Samaria and laid siege to it. At the end of 3 years, the Assyrians took it. So Samaria was captured in Hezekiah's 6th year. It's basically the 7th year. It's 6 years and almost lots and lots of months, almost to the 7th year, which was the 9th year of Hoshea, king of Israel. The king of Assyria deported Israel to Assyria and settled them in Hala and Gozan on the Habor River and in the towns of the Medes. This happened because they had not obeyed the Lord their God, but had violated his covenant. All that Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded, they neither listened to the commands nor carried them out. All right, so you were seeing right there the end of Israel. Remember Israel in the north, 10 tribes. Remember in the south is just one tribe, Levi. That tribe is spread throughout because those are your priests. And so this is the point, 19th king, Hoshea. And Hoshea is the last king of Israel. And they are defeated by the Assyrians, about 725 to 700, right around in there. 722 is the exact date. But in there, the north is carried off. That word is diaspora, dispersion. That means they took them and they spread them throughout the Assyrian kingdom. And the reasons they would do that is so we couldn't all clump up and rebel. There was only a few Jews here, a few Jews here, a few Jews here, a few Jews here. And that way they couldn't all come together and have a revolt together. It was actually a political move, and that's why they did that. So now it's just Judah in the south, just the southern kingdom, and that's the one Hezekiah is over. And he's been there 7 years or so. So not lucky number 7. This is actually when Israel's defeated. And then if we keep reading just a little bit further, it says and this is verse, I guess we're in verse, is that 12? I guess, no, 13. In the 14th year of King Hezekiah's reign, So every 7 years so far, right? 7th year, then now the 14th year. So he's halfway through his reign. He's reigned in the 14th year of King Hezekiah's reign. Sennacherib, king of Assyria, attacked all the fortified cities of Judah and captured them. So Hezekiah, king of Judah, sent this message to the king of Assyria at Lachish. I have done wrong. Withdraw from me, and I will pay whatever you demand of me. The king of Assyria extracted from Hezekiah, king of Judah, 300 talents of silver and 30 talents of gold. So that's 11 tons of silver and 1 ton of gold. 2,000 pounds of gold. And it says, so Hezekiah gave him all the silver that was found in the temple of the Lord and in the treasuries of the royal palace. At this time, Hezekiah, king of Judah, stripped off the gold with which he had covered the doors and doorposts of the temple of the Lord and gave it to the king of Assyria. Now, let's talk about, because it's been 7 days since we talked about Hezekiah. It's been 14 days since we talked about some of this, maybe even 21 because I was out of town that 1 week. So, the part that we have to remember, and this is the part for you guys that is most important, is that so many times myself and other pastors will say when you're serving God, good things and blessings will come on you, right? At the same time, does that mean nothing bad is going to happen to you? Okay, so let's make sure to understand. I want you to see this. If your country is evil, bad things can still happen to you if you're a godly person. If your family is evil, there may still be somebody come to your house to try to hurt your family, and you might be there as a godly person and have to endure that. You understand what I mean by that? We have seen, you all remember when the cruise ship over in the Mediterranean, the guy was drinking, they were on a cruise, and the captain was drinking, and he ran their ship aground, and it tipped over. You know what I'm saying? And so, did I, as a godly person, do anything wrong by going on a cruise? No, not at all. But because of what his sin did, it overflowed into my life. And we know that that's true all the time, right? Is that, that the people around us, that if they commit sin, it doesn't just stop with them. It overflows into our life. Much like my dad was a domestic abuser. I had to endure that because of his sin overflowing into our family with my mom and myself. All right, so here's Hezekiah, and for 2 weeks I've been talking about all the great things that he did to restore the worship of God and to restore them celebrating the Passover and all those things. So wonderful stuff. One right after the other. And then you find immediately what happens is that he spends that first 7 years doing that, and then you have the northern kingdom gets carried away. Is that his fault at all? No. It says they disobeyed God, and that's why he let them be taken by the Assyrians. And so that happens, and then the same group of people come and attack them and defeat them. Did you hear me? The king is a godly man. He's been doing everything God tells him to do. He's been lining up all of the worship in the house of the Lord. He reinstituted all these different things, brought the priests back, brought the Levites back. He's done all these wonderful things, and he gets attacked and defeated. For us, we have to sit there and we go, okay, we talked about just last week, everything, right? Remember he said everything that he undertook he was successful in? Well, it gets captured here, but watch what happens. Now, sometimes, I believe, God tests us to see what our response is going to be. It's just exactly, did y'all ever do, I'm going to really show my age at this point. We used to do a thing called the Presidential Fitness Test. Does anybody remember that in PE? And they made you go and they had these little criteria that you had to pass to be able to get the patch to say that you passed the class or whatever. And I mean, they take you out and run the half mile or whatever it was 600 or something like that is what you had to run. But they made you do the running, and then there was like all kinds of different calisthenics, and there was just a bunch of stuff that you had to do. And they were testing you to see where your fitness level was at. Well, I think God does the same thing. God tests us to see, okay, I've been teaching you about this. Let's see how you're going to do when I test you in this. Right? And it happens quite a bit. So here we are. I have to tell you, because somebody's phone just went off and it cracked me up. I've told y'all before that my friend Vicky, we're sitting in church. There's about, I don't know, maybe 200 people there. and I'm preaching. I'm up in front, and I'm just, in the middle of it, going at it. Got my train of thought going and everything, and I hear. And it's her phone, and it's in her purse, which is down on the floor underneath the pew, and they're trying to find it, and people are grabbing, trying to get at it, and it just keeps going off, and everybody is laughing so loud and everything, and of course her husband's face is so red, he's so mad that this has gone on, but that kind of thing goes on, it just happens, but it was funny. So, all this, he's been doing good stuff, and yet he gets attacked, and the key is, it says that Shalmaneser takes the fortified cities. It's kind of like, that's the ones that are your protection, where you have some of your military out there. Those are cities to protect the city of Jerusalem, all right? That's what's been done so far. So let's look, and he loses a bunch of money. He does a bribe to start with, 11 tons of silver, 1 ton of gold. So he's trying to bribe his way out of it, and that doesn't work. Look at the next thing that says there. Now, you're wondering about his foreign policy, because so far it's not very good. And it says, the king of Assyria sent his supreme commander, his chief officer, and his field commander with a large army from Lachish to King Hezekiah in Jerusalem. They came up to Jerusalem and stopped at the aqueduct of the upper pool on the road to the washerman's field. They called for the king, and Eliakim, son of Hilkiah, the palace administrator, Shebna the secretary, and Joah, son of Asaph, the recorder, went out to them. The field commander said to them, tell Hezekiah, this is what the great king, the king of Assyria, says. On what are you basing this confidence of yours? You say you have the counsel and the might for war, but you speak only empty words. This guy is now taunting them from the Syrian, right? And they've seen what the king of Assyria can do, and now this guy comes and he says, this is what we want from you. Surrender now. And for us, we need to look at a couple of passages here that really stand out, so that we can really look at 1825, because this is actually a giant lie that the guy says, and this is why I was bringing this up tonight. And God is so good that this is where we were. We're going line by line. So this is where we were on the night, Wednesday, after the shooting on Monday. This is the king of Assyria's general that's saying this. So in 25, he says, furthermore, I have come to attack and destroy this place without word from, he says, without word from the Lord himself told me to march against this country and to destroy it. This general, the king is saying this through this general. The Assyrian king is saying, your God told me to come here and destroy you. That is not true. That's a lie. But he's doing it because he's trying to get them to go along with surrender. I want you to see that's actually, and then look at 1832. It says, and let's start in 31. Do not listen to Hezekiah. This is what the king of Assyria says. Make peace with me and come out to me. Then each of you will eat fruit from your own vine and fig tree and drink water from your own cistern until I come and take you to a land like your own, a land of grain and new wine, a land of bread and vineyards, a land of olive trees and honey. Choose life and not death. Let me take you as a slave and you'll have all you really want. Is that true? That's big. That's about as big a lie as it possibly can be. The word you're looking for is you'll be a refugee. What are refugees like? You don't need reading in Southeast Asia. There is a country between Thailand and I think it's Myanmar. It's right in between. There's a river that runs, and Myanmar's here and Thailand's here. If I'm not mistaken, I may be wrong with my geography there. But it's two countries that are side by side. One of them is Thailand, because I have a friend that lives in Chiang Mai. And so the Karen people, and I know y'all are going to laugh because of all the jokes about Karen and all this stuff, but the Karen people are there, and they're hated by both sides, and they got them in refugee camps there. That's the place I was telling you my friend, when she went on a mission trip with her church, was swimming rice across the river while they shot at her with machine guns, and she goes, what did I sign up for, right? I mean, didn't think there was anything like that, right? But the Karen people are so hated, they just keep them behind barbed wire. They just keep them there like that. If you know anything about Brother Andrew, after World War II, Germany was divided up, and there were people in refugee camps because you had all these different countries ruling different sections of Germany, and they just kept them inside little compounds where disease-ridden, all kinds of lice and rats and all that kind of stuff. They had no food, all those kind of things, just terrible conditions. And this guy's making it sound like it's Club Med, right? We're just going to take you, put you somewhere where there's always something good to eat, all the wine you want to drink. Well, and no, that's not the case. He says, choose life and not death. What a complete lie that is. All right, so I want you to look with me. We're going to hit several verses here in a row, and you'll see why God acts right here in just a minute. Okay, look at 1833, right there where we just left off. And this is it says, this is the same guy speaking. And he says, has the God, small g, of any nation ever delivered his land from the hand of the king of Assyria? Okay, that's a pretty big statement right there. Y'all remember Muhammad Ali before a fight would always say things, the most outlandish things before a big fight. He'd say, I'm the greatest of all time. This guy's got no chance whatsoever. In fact, I've fought children that are much stronger than this man that I'm about to fight, whatever. You know what I mean? He'd say outlandish things, crazy stuff. And this guy is saying, no country's God has delivered him yet. What makes you think your God's going to deliver you? This is the first time he says this, but he says it 5 times. So look at 1835. 1835, who of all the gods of these countries has been able to save his land from us? How then can the Lord, capital L, deliver Jerusalem from my hand? All right, look at 1910. And we'll come back. I just want to show you these right in a row. 1910, same guy talking. Say to Hezekiah, king of Judah, do not let the God, small g, you depend on, deceive you when he says Jerusalem will not be given into the hands of the king of Assyria. He says, surely you have heard what the king of Assyria has done to all the countries, destroying them completely. And will you be delivered? Did the gods of the nations that were destroyed by my predecessors deliver them? The gods of, and he lists them all there. 5 times this guy says, your God is not going to deliver you. Your God is like every other one of those fake gods, and he's not going to do anything. So I want you to hear that, because that's part of the reason that God intervenes. In our lives, there are plenty of times where we beg God to intervene and do a miracle. Heal my mother. Heal my grandmother. Heal my husband. Heal my kids. Give us the financial money. Let us get this job. Let us have this house. Let us, right? We ask for God to intervene, fix this economy, fix this, whatever it might be. Right? I need a car, or I need transportation. And we ask for these miracles for God to do. What makes God answer those prayers? What makes God intervene? And the answer is, we don't make God do anything. Right? We come and we do the things that God asks us to do, like he says, pray, fast, believe, do it in Jesus' name, all those kind of things, right? So I want you to watch what happens here, and you watch the obedience. So let's go back to 1836. Not the time of 1836. 2 Kings 1836. And it says, now we're looking for, at this point, God's told them what to do throughout the centuries, and are they doing it? It says, but the people, well actually, let's read the verse right before that. He says, how then can the Lord deliver Jerusalem from my hand? That's the king speaking of Assyria. And then this is about the Israelites. It says, but the people remained silent and said nothing in reply, because the king had commanded, do not answer him. That's actually a huge thing, because so many of us are like, remember, I've talked about the guy in the movie Aliens, who's one of my favorite characters in any movie whatsoever, is that when something bad starts happening, this one guy is Bill Paxton, he's always like, oh man, we're getting ready to die. We're all going to get killed here any minute. He does it every single time. Anytime there's a knock on the wall, a door slammed shut, or he hears something, he goes, oh no, we're all going to die. And I'm thinking, that's the heart of who Doubting Thomas is in the New Testament. Is Doubting Thomas said to Jesus one time, I'll go with you. We're all going to be killed, but I'll go with you. Right? That's not real good faith, right? That's not anything like that. So here he is, and this is going on, and you see the people's response. They're doing what the king asked them to do. They didn't say anything. They didn't jump in with, oh, we're all going to die. None of that. None of that happens. If we keep reading, it says, Then Eliakim, son of Hilkiah, the palace administrator, Shebna the secretary, and Joah, son of Asaph, the recorder, went to Hezekiah with their clothes torn and told him what the field commander had said. That's another act of obedience. In the Old Testament, one of the things culturally you did as an Israelite is if there was a time when things were going bad, you tore your clothes and you put on sackcloth and ashes. Why would you do that?
To show your mourning?
Yeah. It's an ultimate act of humility, but it is mourning. Is that things are so bad. And it's not just fake mourning, it's actual mourning that things are so bad. And so they've done this. This is the leaders have done this. This is not the people at this point. This is the leaders who have done this. Look at 19:1. When King Hezekiah heard this, he tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and wept in the temple of the Lord. Now, I'm going to be honest with you that there's things in the Bible, plenty of them, that I don't understand. But let me give you a piece of advice. And it's not so that you can go and buy you a big sack of onions and cut them all up so that you cry. But in the Old Testament and the New Testament, when God's people weep, God sits up and listens. It breaks his heart. I'm not saying that we force God to do it. It's almost as bad as, if my wife were ever to get pulled over by a police officer and they said, "Ma'am, do you know how fast you were going?" Jill is going to, I'm just being honest with you, Jill is going to go, "Can't believe I got pulled over and get a ticket. My husband's going to be so bad." And they're going to go, "Okay, ma'am, I'm just going to give you a warning today. You just go along and have a nice day." Right? That's what's going to happen. God, I don't know why, except that God loves a broken and contrite heart in terms of in the midst of what's going on, when we are weeping bitterly. Notice what was Hannah doing when she was at the temple when Eli accused her of being drunk? What was she doing? Weeping bitterly is what it said. And so she was pouring it out so much that the guy said, "You're drunk, get out of here." And she's like, "No, I am just in such a bad spot. I can't have a child. And I've got Penina over here who's got multiple children who keeps lording over me and mocking me every day." And she goes, "My life is horrible." And when she's crying, God hears and answers. And notice that if we read that, all the John Wayne people in our culture would be like, "If you're a man and I catch you crying, I'm going to take you and I'm going to beat you down." No man is supposed to be crying, right? That's what we were raised on. I'm sorry. Today, that's not the case, right? That's not the case at all. But when I was a kid, if you were in a ball game or you were out somewhere and somebody punched you or whatever, if you cried, oh my goodness, that was 10 times worse than taking a beating, right? If you cried. If you got, I can remember, getting a splinter in my finger and going, "That hurts so bad." And my dad going, "One tear falls from the ground. One tear falls from your eye. You're going to get a splinter in your finger," right? I mean, it's that kind of thing. But it means something to God.
If you cry, I'm going to give you something to cry about.
Yes, exactly. I'm going to give you something to cry about. That's right. That's exactly the same words, right? All right, so let's keep reading because the king is now weeping. We've got to see that. And it says, he sent Eliakim, the palace administrator, Shebna, the secretary, and the leading priests, all wearing sackcloth, to the prophet Isaiah, son of Amos. Okay, so what was his response to this threat? They've defeated my fortified cities. I've offered him a bribe. Now he's threatening to do away with us. What is his response? Because what is our response when something bad happens? Okay, so sometimes, if we're honest about it, and Jimmy and I are out working on it at his house, and he said, "Chris, will you help me build a fence?" And we're out there, and I go, "Choo, choo, 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 choo," wham! And I hit my thumb. What do people, right? What do you do when you hit your thumb? Well, you might cry, number one. But number two, what might you do? It's that old Yosemite Sam. Right? Rabble, right? All that stuff because they didn't want to put it on TV for kids and cartoons, right? And so that's one response. Another response is my dad would never fight with my mom, have an argument, conflict. He would just walk away. I'm talking about my stepdad. He would just walk away and let her calm down. Because if you didn't, then it was just going to be, because remember the situation she came out of is that she and my real dad would go like this, like this, like this, like this. And that's when you kind of knew the volcano was getting ready to erupt, and all of our dishes were going to get busted against the walls, and chairs were going to get broken up, and the fist fight starts, right? So my stepdad would go, I'm going to argue with him, just go out to the garage and start working. And then she'd calm down, he'd calm down, then he'd go in and they'd talk about it. And sometimes in our relationships, that's a good thing, and sometimes it's a bad thing. Because if you're constantly running from conflict, then what do? It festers like a sore, right? You don't take care of it. You don't put Bactine on it. That's what my grandmother would have done, right? Put Bactine on it. You don't put medicine on it, what happens? Festers, gets infected, right? All of those kind of things. So one response could have been, I'm just going to put that out of my mind, and we're going to have a big party. We'll have a parade. That's what we're going to do. We'll just celebrate and have games, and we'll have people out here fighting like they did in Rome. Right? Doug Cummings and I were talking the other day, and we said, that's kind of what we do today. You know how the history will say that Nero fiddled while Rome burned, you know, in 62, 64 AD? We're doing that currently. I asked my friend Jim, I said, where do you think we are in terms of our economy, in terms of, Jim's a pastor, he runs Wares Valley Ranch, you know, and which is an orphanage. And I said, Jim, where are we in terms of our country, in terms of, you know, how are we doing? And he said, you mean? And I said, yeah, like we're standing at the edge of a cliff about to fall off. And he goes, I think we're about 2 feet from the ground already off the cliff. And I said, man, I don't like to think of it like that, but for us, what is our response when something bad happens? And sometimes our response is, let's go to the movies. Sometimes our response is, let's go to the show. Sometimes our response is, oh, the Super Bowl, or the March Sweet, you know, the Field of 64, March Madness, or it's the World Series, or it's, right, whatever's going on, the new episode of Bachelor, right? I mean, you know, all that stuff that we get so caught up in, and the world around us is kind of burning. And then we're just kind of, and part of that is our natural coping mechanism of I want to escape. That's why drugs are so prevalent right now. That's why suicide is so prevalent right now. It's an escape. It's to get away from all the pressure and all the stuff that's going on. But their response is sackcloth and ashes, weeping, praying, and now we've sent to go talk to Isaiah. And Isaiah's the prophet. And so, you know, if you're going to go do something, you want to ask God, is this what you want me to do? You go find the priest or the prophet. That's what you would do. That should be the step one. And yet, I have hundreds of pages in my Bible of people who the first thing they did wasn't go find God, wasn't go find the prophet or the priest. They just went and did whatever they thought was best. And how'd that turn out? You guys have all heard me say this, and of course Connor's not married, Victor's not married. I have kids of my own that aren't married, you know, and I say, are you really going to pick somebody out to marry without talking to God about it? Are you really not going to pray before you do this? That's to me one of the key things. And so they go find Isaiah, and then let's keep reading here. Look at the next line says, if we pick up right where I left off, he says, this is what Hezekiah says, that this day is a day of distress and rebuke and disgrace, as when children come into the moment of birth and there's no strength to deliver them. It may be that the Lord your God will hear all the words of the field commander, whom his master, the king of Assyria, has sent to ridicule the living God, and that he will rebuke him for the words the Lord your God has heard. Therefore pray for the remnant that still survives. He's asking Isaiah to pray, and he's making a call to prayer. But did you hear the best part? What do we do when we're in trouble? When we're kids, what do we do when we're in trouble? I didn't mean to do it, and my brother was the one that pushed me. He's the one that pushed me in that lamp, and that's the only reason the lamp got broke was because he pushed me into it. We start rationalizing why we're in the predicament that we're in, and we actually sometimes go, Lord, my sin's not near as bad as his. Look at his sin. He's got a lot of sin. That's bad sin over there. I just got a little bit of sin over here. So you should really do my favor as opposed to his favor. We do that all the time. And so here he is, and there's none of that. There's none of it. In fact, the only thing that Hezekiah says, he says these words. Maybe God will hear him ridiculing him and do something about it. He doesn't say, I'm good enough, Lord, you should answer me because I'm good enough, I've done this for you. And he could have done that, right? Hezekiah cleaned up, he reopened the temple. They started redoing the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread. He declared a fast. He declared all this different cool stuff. And he could have said, oh, Lord, you know what I've done for you. And he didn't do any of that. He said, can't you hear what he's saying about you, Lord? And if we pick up a little bit further, it says, when King Hezekiah's officials came to Isaiah, I'm in verse 19:5. Isaiah said to them, tell your master, this is what the Lord says. Do not be afraid of what you have heard. Those words with which the underlings of the king of Assyria have blasphemed me. Listen! Exclamation mark. When he hears a certain report, I'll make him want to return to his own country, and there I'll have him cut down with the sword. Okay? So, here we are, and that's good news. Is it not? What Isaiah just said is really good news. What's the problem with it? What's the problem with the good news? Nobody's listening to me. Everybody's listening to me. They're looking at these babies all going.
But we're listening.
I know, I know. It's the greatest. I love little babies because people just laugh. They just love it. Okay, so Isaiah says they're going to be defeated. The Assyrians are going to be defeated. And yet, it hasn't happened yet. When Hezekiah turns around and he looks, there's still a vast army there of Assyrians that's outside the door. You know what I'm saying? It sounds great that God's going to do this, but it ain't happened yet. You know, what's that word? You know, the old cliche we say, don't count your chickens before they hatch, right? That kind of thing. Got a lot of eggs here. Looks like we're going to have a lot of chickens, but, you know. And by the way, on Monday, the Brattons will have 24 chickens in their house. All right. So, that's a squirrel that's going a different direction, all right? So let's look at this. Look at verse 14. Let's skip down just a little bit. It says, Hezekiah received the letter from the messengers and read it. Then, and this is a letter from Sennacherib, the king. And it says, then he went up to the temple of the Lord, spread it out before the Lord, and Hezekiah prayed to the Lord, Lord, the God of Israel, enthroned between. He's praying at this point, right? At this point, he goes to the temple, he lays it out before the Lord, and he says, I can't control this, Lord. Have you ever said those words? Because so many times we tend to go, okay, if I sit down and I write down something really, I'll write my feelings down, and then I know so many people that I have been friends with. I've done it myself. I've counseled with people who said, this person, we're in love, they just don't really know it yet. I'm going to do this grand gesture. I'm going to write them this poem. I'm going to write them this song. I'm going to go and I'm going to set up this huge elaborate thing, and then they'll know how much I love them, and they'll fall in love with me, and they'll say yes to getting married, and we'll fall in love and live happily ever after. We do that all the time. We do those kinds of grand gestures. We even have a cliche for it, right? And so that's taking matters into our hands. I can't control whether somebody loves me or not. I can't dictate that. Only God can do that. And so for us, you know, if I'm sitting here and my cities have been defeated and my army's been defeated, and I'm sitting here and I'm just wide open, vulnerable to this army, and there's like hundreds of thousands of this army that's out there, can I make a speech that's going to change that? Our people in our government tend to think so, right? They always tend to think about whatever happens, I'm going to make a speech about it. I'd like to talk about the train derailment in Ohio, and you're like, there's toxic chemicals sinking into the soil as we speak, but I'm appreciating your 3-hour sermon that you just did for us here, right? It's not going to change a thing. And so he goes to the temple, spreads it out before the Lord, and starts praying. He talks about all that the king has done. Isaiah tells them what's getting ready to happen. And then let's look here at let's finish up here this last part. Everybody look with me. The very end of chapter 19. Look at 32. 19:32. Most of 19 is Isaiah's response, just saying this is what's going to happen. It says, therefore, this is what the Lord says concerning the king of Assyria. He will not enter this city or shoot an arrow here. He will not come before it with shield or build a siege ramp against it. By the way that he came, he will return, and he will not enter this city, declares the Lord. I will defend this city and save it for my sake and for the sake of David, my servant. There's the why you were looking for. Was the why, did he say, because Hezekiah is such a good guy? Did he say it was because you did the Passover last week? That's why. That's why I'm going to do it. No. He says, for myself and for David's sake, I'm going to defend this town. And then look what happens. This is what you're hoping for. This is what you dream of and you believe in and have faith in. You want stuff like this to happen. And this is how you know that it was God. You know what I'm saying? There's plenty of times where we go, God did that and took care of that for me. Right? You understand what I mean by that? Okay. Joshua. How many times did Joshua lead God's people into battle and they won? 10, 20, 30 times, right? And we would go, see what God did? And yet Joshua was leading an army into battle. And sometimes other people would go, that was just the Israelites defeating him. Joshua was a good general. He took his men. They defeated him. It wasn't God. Even though I do believe in every single instance, it was God. But what happened to Korah in Korah's rebellion? When Korah and his other two guys, Dathan and Abiram, when they came and they said, hey, why is it that Moses and Aaron and Miriam get to make all the decisions? Why can't we make decisions too? We're great leaders of the Israelites. Why can't that? And God said to Moses, these are the words, you need to take a step back. And Moses said, yes, sir. And he and Aaron and all of them take a step back, and the ground opens up and swallows Korah and Dathan and Abiram and their whole families. Just right down in there. That's when you know it's God, right? That's how you know, without a doubt. When you're standing at Sodom and Gomorrah and fire comes down from the heavens and burns it up, you go, I think that was God. I'm pretty sure that was God, right? That's what happens. So here he is, and this is what happens. Let's look together. Verse 35. This is 1935. That night, the angel of the Lord went out and put to death 185,000 in the Assyrian camp. When the people got up the next morning, there were all the dead bodies. So Sennacherib, king of Assyria, broke camp and withdrew. That means retreated. He returned to Nineveh and stayed there. Let's read the next verse. One day while he was worshiping in the temple of his god, Nisroch, so he's at his temple worshiping a false god, his sons, Andromelech and Sharezer, killed him with the sword, and they escaped to the land of Ararat, and Esarhaddon, his son, succeeded him as king. Mighty change of events there, right? Did Hezekiah have to fight at all? Didn't have an army. Couldn't have fought. And yet, 185,000 died in their sleep that night. 100. Okay, how many does UT's big old fat stadium hold up there? Neyland Stadium? 108,000 people. And if you're there, you go, wow, look at all the people. 108,000. This is 185,000. Almost double. That died in one night in their sleep. And then it said that the king withdrew, which is a big surprise, right? Not at all. That he retreated because 200,000 of my men just died. And he goes back home and he's killed in his temple by who?
His sons.
What's more insulting than having your own kids king? Right? In the temple of his God. And then they have a change of command. And here's the thing. That ends the Assyrian Empire. Babylonians take over after that. And so here we are, and we see when God intervenes, you know it's God, number one, right? You know it's God. Number two is, what made God do this? Nothing made God do this except 5 times the king said, your God ain't doing nothing for you. No other God's done anything against me so far. Look who I am. Look what I have. We're fixing to annihilate you. You better surrender now. 5 times he said that, and God goes, oh yeah? Really? Really? Because there's one true living God. The rest are stone, silver, gold, made out of whatever, right? There's only one true living God. And we saw what happened there. Now, here, y'all are feeling good now, right? Absolutely, you guys are like, yes, that's what I wanted to hear. I want to hear God rescued him. Look at the next verse, chapter 20, verse 1. In those days, Hezekiah became ill and was at the point of death. Dang, Lord. Doggone it. We just beat the Assyrians, and now he's ill. And it says in this part of the story is that he prays, he weeps, God heals him, and he says, for the next 15 years, I'm going to extend your life and give you 15 extra years. Well, remember, he's at this point of the story, he's ruled 14 years. That means it's just the end of his reign. When he dies, it's going to be the end of his reign. And the reason that I point that out is because he's sitting here and he's sick, and God extends it out, but it's kind of like you're sitting there going, Lord, I appreciate the miracle. I do. I really appreciate the miracle that you're going to heal me from this thing. And it said he had boils. He had boils, and they took a poultice of figs. Notice that they healed him through medicine. They did a poultice on the boils, and he was healed, lived another 15 years. But for us, we're sitting there going, why does this bad stuff keep happening? Why does this keep happening? And sometimes it is that idea that other people sin. The king of Assyria is the one who, out of his pride and out of his selfishness, is saying, I'm going to defeat the whole world. I'm going to defeat every country. I'm going to hurt them all, and then I'll rule over them all. So his sin overflowed into everybody's life. But then at the same time, what else is out there? Disease, sickness, right? All those things. We know those things exist around the world, and sometimes it's stuff that we don't have a cure for, and sometimes it's like, do you know that still today there are people who die of the plague in India? You know that people die of cholera in Haiti all the time. Cholera. Cholera, the reason we have cholera is because your conditions are so poor that you're, I had told you in 2008 when I went down there, they would run all of their sewage, like the sewage out of your house. Every piece of sewage would run through along the side of the street, down both sides of the street, till it hit they carried it to the ocean. They just ran all their sewage into the ocean. So when you go to the Caribbean, you see all that gorgeous blue, Caribbean blue water, right? It's all gorgeous. And when you would fly into Haiti in 2008, there'd be all these brown lines going out in that beautiful water because they're just running their toilets into the street and then down to the local pipe that goes out to the water. Every city. And then they'd have cholera and they'd wonder why. Well, because we're running poop in the streets, right? I mean, that's part of our issue here. When they sell everything on the streets, they'd lay down a blanket, put all of everything on top of that blanket that they're going to sell, which would include mangoes, bananas, all that kind of stuff. Their carvings, their candles, all that stuff. And at the end of the day, when they sold everything and they put everything that they didn't sell up, they take the blanket and go like this and just throw all the refuse into the street. Well, after you do that for about 500 days, you got muck that's this deep in your streets are like this, and it's like when you watch a show about England in the 1500s and they're walking through the streets and they're going, that's what Haiti was like in 2008 when you went down there. Now they built infrastructure and they have all that stuff going to the right places, and so it's a much better place. But that's how you get cholera. So it's again our sin overflowing because rich people here, a handful of rich people, everybody else is poor and they won't do anything to fix it, and we're living in filth and we get that. So sometimes it's that kind of stuff. And then sometimes the last thing is that sometimes it is God testing us to see what we're going to do in this particular situation. And a lot of times our response is what he's looking for. What are we going to do when times seem bad? When things seem to be at their worst? What's our response going to be? And our response what it needs to do is drive us to our knees. And instead, sometimes it drives us to clench our fists. Right? Drives us to that point. And that's not the response he's looking for. The other day, this guy was screaming to yell at me in traffic. He was coming this way and he blocked the road, and I was sitting like this trying to go, and I was like this, and he gets out of the car and he's like, you and me, now, right here. And I'm like, so I opened my door and I stood up and I went, why am I getting out of my car? We're not going to fight. We're going to sit here and look like idiots for about 20 minutes and talk about each other, and then he's going to go, if I hit you, you're going to sue me and take all my stuff. And I'm going to go, if I hit you, you're going to sue me and take all my stuff. And we're both going to go, yeah. And then we're both going to get in our cars and drive off. I said, this is ridiculous. I'm getting in my car and leaving. See ya. Went on. It made no sense. There's no reason to even interact in that situation. And so for us, so many different things happen. We have to be willing to pray, fast, weep when necessary, that we got to be able to be obedient in those situations, because they were obedient in every single response. And how do you figure out what the obedience is knowing God's word. What am I supposed to do? This is the handbook. It's the guidebook. It's the map to living in the world. And ignorance of it is not an excuse, right? We talked about that. All right, let's pray. Dear Lord, thank you so much for the evening. Thank you for the story of Hezekiah and your mighty miracle to save the Israelites in the tribe of Judah. In the kingdom of Judah. There, we are thankful that at times that you wait to see what we're going to do. You're always working for our good. That's what Romans 8:28 tells us. But also, you are trying to help us to, as you know, a lot of times when we were kids, our parents taught us to ride a bike, and we would get going, and they were always hanging on to the back of it, and we were watching our child to see if they had the balance, to see if they were pedaling, to see if they were holding both the handlebars, and then we would let go and see how they did, but we would stay close by in case we had to grab it again. And you do that so many times in our lives, Lord. You do that in teaching us how to be independent, teaching us how to be totally dependent on you at times, but helping us to be able to grow up to the people that you want us to be, people that exercise their faith out in the world and trust you in everything. Thank you for that, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen. God bless you. Hope you have a great evening. Thanks for joining us tonight.